yeah, he was here. He just left. So he goes, where is he? Test 1, 2. If you guys could make your way over, and if you're not going to make your way over, if I could have your attention for a minute. Guys that are just hanging out, chatting, if I could just have your attention for a little bit. Try and do a nice quietness over the crowd. 1, 2, 3, go. Pete Dutton. Everyone. All right, cool. My name is Bobby Grossi. Bob Grossi, known as Bobby Grossi. Yeah, we love you. My grandpa was Grandpa Gross. He's part of the original Ridge Runners that helped set up a lot of this stuff. My dad was Bobby Grossi, Bob Grossi. Yeah. He was riding, my mom and my dad would skip school and ride this field up here, and he would do wheelies with her on the back for days on end. I can't confirm this, but I may have been conceived in this field. I'm not sure. Most of you guys know my dad and his story, but also my uncle was Billy Grossi. He was just an amazing man. You guys know his, as far as his motocross record, it's awesome. But most people don't know this, but he literally saved my life. I worked for him doing tile work when I was 17. He became like a mentor to me, and when I was going down a really bad road. And so I'm super grateful. Not only is he a great motocross guy, but he's also my uncle and a mentor to me. So, yeah, he's saving me. Yeah, where's Bill? He's probably hiding somewhere. So he probably didn't hear any of that. He just whatever. So one of the things that I was asked to do is do a little intro and then say a prayer. And so my intro is this, because a lot of people, when they hear about my grandpa, my dad, and my uncle, they ask, did you rock? It's in your blood. And my answer is no, God had a different plan for me. Instead of winning races, I was called to win souls. I've been a pastor for quite a few years, and how that happens is this man named Jesus who was born in a barn. Now, here's the funny thing. When people say, what are you, born in a barn? You can say, I'm in good company, because Jesus was born in a barn. And he lived this amazing life, a life like we've never seen before, perfectly. He died the death that we deserved on the cross and rose again on the third day and offers life to all, to everyone here. And how that happens, how this whole thing happens, is the life he lived. See, when he went to the cross, he died for your sins, took the penalty you deserve. And then when we believe in him, he takes his record of righteousness and applies it to our account. So when God the Father sees us, he sees us through the record of Christ. And that is what we call the good news. Amen? I mean, that's phenomenal news. And here's the ticket to admission, that you believe. That's the ticket. That you simply believe that Christ died for your sins. Now, how I'm going to tie all this in is that Jesus told this really cool story about the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan is a story about a guy who was walking down the road and he got jumps. He ended up being naked, wounded, left for dead, all of his stuff stolen. And somebody walked around him. A religious leader walked around him because they didn't want to get their hands dirty. And then another religious leader walked around him because he didn't want to get his hands dirty. And then a Samaritan, which is crazy because if you know the story, somebody that was religiously, politically, like across the board, opposite of a Jewish person at the time, that he went and he helped him. He reached in, got his hands dirty, and helped this man out. Now, I just want to remind you why we're here through that story. We're here not only to hang out, meet some of our, guys that we've always like looked up to and all these different things, but we're here to support Road to Recovery that reaches into the dirt and helps people when they're in need, just like the Good Samaritan. Across political lines, across religious lines, doesn't matter. And so I just want to remind us all that every raffle ticket you bought, whether you got food, whatever the case, I just want to, give yourself a hand for supporting such an amazing organization. On that note, please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we come to you in Jesus' name in the power of your Spirit. We thank you so much for this opportunity to not only gather, to not only have a great time, have some great food, but also to support such an amazing organization that can come along the side, reach in the dirt, and help people that are down and need help. And so, Lord, I pray that you would bless Road to Recovery, bless the many names that help put this whole thing on. And Lord, we thank you for your grace. We pray these things in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And all God's people said, amen. Sorry, I felt like I was in church there for a second. If you have questions about faith, I would love to talk. So if you're like, hey, that sounded interesting, or I got questions, I'll be available somewhere over here. I'm hanging out with all these old guys over here. And just saying, come on, JoJo. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Now, if you would give it up for Joe Abadi.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Charlie Halcomb, Bob Stewart, and everyone for asking me once again to be the MC to this great event. We are live on Facebook, so have a good time, tell your stories, and make them good. And look, this is Jeff Fox, by the way. I'm sure you've all heard of the name Fox as far as motocross goes. Let me say this, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, Jeff. So you just let it rip. Now, of course, from Brad Lackey to Ryan Dungey, so many of the stars of the motocross world have used Fox gear. Why don't you take us down the road to where you first got the idea to begin a clothing line?
The clothing line, actually, that comes about because we had a team. We in 77 we had Richter and Pat Richter and Steve Wise and Mark Barnett. Okay, and we sending them out to compete in the nationals, the 125 nationals. The idea was we were pretty big with shock absorbers at that point already, but we saw an opportunity to expand into expansion chambers, carb kits, and all that kind of thing. And the two companies that were killing it there were FMF and DG, both from Southern California. So they had a race, so we had to have a race team out there. And the thing is, if you can put your name on the gas tank, but that's pretty small. The real advertising space is on the clothing of the people, especially the jersey, right? So we made some clothing in Fox colors, they're red, yellow, and orange. And we went out to the racetrack and raced on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday morning the phone rang, and people wanted to know if they could buy that clothing. It's genius to figure out that we ought to make that clothing because people wanted to buy it already. So that's how we got into clothing.
So tell us, where was that clothing first made? Was it made here in the United States?
There were jerseys were made in the USA, gloves and pants were made in Finland, and boots were made in Italy. And then it changed with time because then eventually we went to Korea. From Korea we went to China. From China we went to Vietnam. I think it's a lot of Vietnam today, various countries in Asia.
So your clothing line started around 1977. It's still being produced today. Guys are still wearing that gear. Are you still part of that company, or was that sold off?
Our family sold our company about 10 years ago, and my brother, who I'm the head of the Fox, and he's the tail. Well, he sold his company about the same time.
Let me ask you this. I mean, obviously he's your brother, and we're all very familiar with the Fox line of suspension, the forks, the air shocks, and that was a big leap forward at that time during the suspension revolution. How long was it from conception of the air shock to actually making the prototype?
Oh, it happened about the same time, actually. Yeah, because my brother wasn't working. I started Fox in 74, February of 74. He was working, he had this idea about that time, and he was making a prototype in a friend of his garage. He needed a lathe and a couple other machines. So he was working on that. Meanwhile, I started Fox, and then I made a shock absorber. The first spring shock absorber was called Fox Shocks. That was with Steve Simons and I worked on that together. And then the air shock came in after that. The interesting story, one of the interesting stories about my brother is the air shocks were going crazy. Everyone was running them because the standard shocks, they were trash and they would break. So you had to, in air shocks, you're not going to break an air shock. It was way too strong. So everyone was using, Team Honda was using them, basically everybody. And in 1980, we sold about 10,000 pairs of air shocks. But about the same time, the Japanese all of a sudden made the shock absorbers that were pretty good. So that you didn't need to have air shocks. You could still be competitive locally. On the nationals, maybe you wouldn't be, but it was good enough. So the sales went from 10,000 pair one year to 1,000 pair the next year. It was like driving off a cliff. And when you get used to those sales coming in, the money goes out someplace. And it's tougher to stop that money going out. So especially it was tough for my brother. And as a matter of fact, he kept his company solvent by playing poker at night.
For a year and a half or two, that's what he did, huh? He must have been pretty good at poker.
Still today, yeah.
What about the Fox Forks? How many sets of those do you think were actually made? They sell for big money today, usually between $3,000 and $5,000, depending on the condition. When did you guys come up with the Fox Fork? And how many sets of those forks do you think you've made?
That was my brother Bob's. Totally had nothing to do with it. And I would guess that they probably sold about 100 pair. I think that's what it was. Very small.
Ladies and gentlemen,
the other Steve Simons had made the Simons forks, which were almost as good, but a lot less expensive. So I think, and even those, I don't think he sold very many of those fork kits that Steve designed.
You like Steve Simons? He's a pretty good guy, right? Steve, are you here? Oh, there he is. Jeff Fox, ladies and gentlemen. Nice round of applause for Jeff. Thank you.
I also want to mention Keith Bontrager, who worked with me for a number of years, and of course has done fabulous with mountain bikes.
I have Keith Bontrager on the list here. Keith, are you here? We'll find him in a little while. Jeff Fox, thank you so much. While we are on the suspension kick, and Jeff did bring up Steve Simons as our next guest, why don't we bring Steve up? Steve Simons, ladies and gentlemen. Steve, we were on a little bit of a suspension kick with Jeff Fox, and I asked him a question about Bob, and it kind of prompted me to ask the same question to you. How soon after the concept of the upside down fork did you come out with the prototype?
Started in '79, and the easy answer is Brad won the 1982 World Championship, so it was out then, and we were selling them that year in 1982.
While I'm also thinking about this, and it's a little off topic, you will be inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame in November, correct?
That's right. It's about time.
I think we can all agree that is long overdue. Now, I learned something from Steve. He doesn't know he taught me this, and I haven't had a chance to use it yet. But he said, if you ever invent something and somebody copies it, do not sue them. Wait till more people make it, then sue them. Steve, you had the upside down fork on Brad Lackey's bike in '82. It wasn't long after that Honda thought it'd be a good idea to make upside down forks as well. They copied that, but you didn't sue them. You waited a while.
Right. So you have to have a reason to sue them. So there were several aspects to that patent that became important later on, and so the patent was issued in, I think it was '83 or '84, and in '87, I believe, KYB and Showa both copied the infringing features. And I was lucky enough to convince them through, this is obviously before emails, so I had to write them back and forth, and I convinced them that they were infringing. And I had a really nice patent attorney who was nearby me, and I told him that actually KYB wrote me a letter and said, we've reviewed your claims and we agree that we infringe. Never in the world has that ever happened before. And then about 2 months later, Showa kind of came, they asked me if KYB had an exclusive license, and I said no, and they asked me if I would be willing to license them, and I said under the right terms we can do that. And within a year, I've been to Japan. They've given me a kind of a open-end visitor excursion through their factories, and very nice to me. Signed the patent agreement, and we were done. So that was the easiest agreement I'd ever made. They every quarter they came with good numbers on what they'd sold. I was very honest, above board, way better than anybody else. So there was WP, which was you have to harass them to get paid. Olene's the same thing. So it's a great story. Great, like sort of lived the American dream in a lot of ways. So that kind of wrapped that up, and that patent was 17 years long, and they honored it the whole time, never missed a payment. So it was good for me. So I bought a cabin in Lake Tahoe with the money. So my kids enjoyed that. So I think that's the end of that story.
Steve Simons, thank you so much. I just wanted you to maybe talk about, Road to Recovery and some of your thoughts on that.
Oh my God. I think it's a fantastic organization. I'm glad that people support folks that have been injured. I mean, unfortunately in this industry, you see that happen once in a while. I was there when Roger DeCoster had his front end break off his bike, and he pretty much ate dirt at Carnegie Cycle Park. David Bailey was injured in front of me at I forget the track, but it was a Golden State Series race, and his mechanic stayed with me while they worked on him in Santa Clara. And I have a daughter, or I had a daughter that had brain disease that needed a lot of help. And so sometimes people get into situations where they're kind of over their head, and to try to take care of somebody with serious injuries is so tough, and there are certain things about it that probably shouldn't happen. The insurance companies are. I have one little quick sidebar for my daughter. She had a brain disease, and we took her to the Mayo Clinic, which was amazing. And every time she had something serious that had to be done, I got it pre-approved through the insurance, just to make sure, because this is probably a $500,000 price tag attached to that. And so to get that pre-approval, to any of you that have this same situation come up, it's super important that you document that and hold on to it, because you might need it later. Afterwards, the hospital was asking for payment, and I was asking the insurance company to pay for it, and they wouldn't do it. And so they made up kind of lame excuses where they said the doctor that performed this is out of your coverage. And so we fought them, and luckily Mayo Clinic they really understood what was going on, and they said, you call us every month or every 2 months, tell us how you're doing, we'll wait for you, which is pretty incredible. And in about a year and a half, we had brought this to the Insurance Board of California, and they twisted the insurance company's arm, and they finally paid for it. So I'm sitting here thinking, all right, so I'm fairly well off. I speak English. I don't have a problem understanding what they're saying, but to me, the gal that I was having to interact with was totally trying to call my bluff and like force me to talk up with, $500,000. I didn't do it. We sort of like won that, but there was something really wrong that happened there. So I think the lesson is to talk to the people that you owe the money to, and in some cases, like in the case of the Mayo Clinic, they were willing to work with me. And in fact, they said, don't worry about it. I mean, just keep pushing and it'll resolve itself. So that's
So it is places like Road to Recovery and other people that do get involved, which makes Road to Recovery organization that guys who are unfortunately injured can rely on. Steve Simons, AMA Hall of Fame? No? I heard this rumor. Steve, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Steve Simons, ladies and gentlemen. John Nunez, will you join me here on the stage here? Thank you, John. I don't have any questions for you. I just want you to hold this microphone while I get some water. Oh, thank you, John. Seriously, have a seat. I do have some questions for you. Everybody who's probably driven up here today or was at the hotel last night saw a Fox van. And I thought there it is right there, back there. And I thought it was the regular, it looks like, I think it's a 1977 Dodge. But you have taken the time to really, I guess, do a reverse restoration, so to speak, on it. And you've made it look authentic as it has been, like it's been preserved. And tell me about why you did that, how you fit into the motocross scene, and what made you make a motocross box of the van.
Well, I grew up in Campbell, and I would go to the Moto X Box factory to the parking lot sales. So I grew up riding here in Hollister, Carnegie sometimes, but just always wore Fox. And as I got older, I just started collecting Fox gear. A lot of times it's just a lot of the 80s, 90s stuff. But as I collected, I like to get more of the older vintage 70s, early 80s. So when I started collecting a lot of that gear, I started getting interested in more of the older stuff. And I saw pictures of the van.
When did you buy the van? When did you purchase it?
I bought it 3 years ago. So when I saw the picture of the van, I wanted to find it. And I saw a lot of old pictures in Cycle News of the old motocross vans for sale. Found this one in Oregon, transported down, and then just started the restoration. And going off the limited amount of pictures that were available, just kind of took my best guess on trying to bring it back to what you see.
That van, the back of it is full of Fox gear. I asked you about some of it today, and am I correct when I say that some of it is going to be raffled off for the benefit of Road to Recovery?
Yes, definitely. There's a Wozniak jersey, there's a Richter jersey, and there's Waxham came over and was able to sign one, and yeah, they're going to be given to the Road to Recovery for raffle.
You've done a great job on the van. The gear will be for sale. Where will it be for sale?
Well, we're giving it to the Road to Recovery, so wherever. I don't know where they're going to sell it at, but it's going to be donated to them so they can auction it off. Yeah.
So if there's anyone here that is interested in that Fox gear that will be for sale, you could go on the Road to Recovery website and find out exactly when that's all going to take place. John Nunez, great job of preserving history for us old motocross guys. Thank you so much. Larry Wosick. Where's Larry Wosick? Larry did not want me to talk about his career in any way. He told me this last night. I'm not kidding. Don't bring up my career. Nobody's really interested. Larry, a top 10 finisher in 1979, 1980. You did ride with Fox. And that's all you wanted me to say. You said nobody would be interested. Take a seat. Relax. You said nobody would be interested in your career. But you did want me to spend some time talking about or asking you about the Road to Recovery. And also, because this did literally hit home for you and your son, Levi, how organizations like Road to Recovery have helped you and how you're doing something to give back to injured riders as well. So first, let's talk about Levi's injury, what happened, and how you got support when that came about. And you could hold the microphone because my arm's falling asleep.
Yeah, no, thank you. We live in Florida now, but we wouldn't miss this, for anything because, boy. So, um, yeah. Until you've, been in a position, you hear of road recovery or other things, and you don't really realize, they help and they help injured riders and all that. But I could tell you from our experience, without road recovery, they've been such a huge help in the things, not monetary, but just having somebody on the other end of the phone that could help you with all the things that your family's going through, from help with what type of a wheelchair to buy. It's really nothing financially. It's just the support of all the other things, because the finance deal is, that's one thing, but then it's, the life and the equipment and all the things you need. And they just made that difficult time so much, doable. And I just feel a big gratitude to everybody there, especially to Mike Young. And Mike's amazing for road to recovery. Being an injured guy, he could really relate to what they're going through. So
there was something very special that you said to me last night when we were talking about this. And you said mentally, your son Levi was so strong when he had his injury. Please share with us here what had happened and how he felt, how his life is going to go on regardless of his injury.
That's difficult.
I do that because there's questions sometimes while you're going, and you guys don't like to give me the mic back. All right, all right. Here, put your hand down. Tell me about your son and his mental capacity, how strong he was when he was injured.
Levi was amazing. From and that's what is truly important. That the kids that get injured in this sport, they're already, hardcore. They're dedicated people. So it's so important that they get through it with their strength. So if this unfortunate thing happens to others, they have people to look up to. When Levi got injured, for instance, I was in the waiting for him to go into his surgery. I still had all the dirt from the track all over me, and my 17-year-old son is going through what he's going through, and so I phoned a friend that had also had a spinal cord injury and living in England, Gary Butcher, also a friend of mine. So I said, Gary, Levi's been injured, and you don't know when they say, oh, you have a T4 or T5, or you know about a broken tibia or fibula or a wrist, but you don't know what that means. So, and I remember I said, Gary, like Levi, he injured his T4. So Gary says, oh, he's just like David. And when he said he's just like David, as a dad, it was almost like if you think you have cancer and then the doctor says, oh, guess what? You're cancer free. Right. They're relieved because how David lived his life and a full life and all the awesome things he did. It's like, okay, well, Levi's he's going to be fine.
Did Road to Recovery help a lot with Levi, or was there a different organization at that time?
Well, Levi was an amateur, so there was no financial assistance. But like I said, that's really secondary. The most important thing is just helping you, mentally and psychologically through it all. So that was much more important. So, and Mike Young was very, instrumental. But what I'm saying is, it's important that these kids, they get through this and they strive and survive. Like Mitch Payton, and, all this. So if it does happen, you say, well, geez, look what Mitch is doing. Look what David's done. Look what Levi's done. So yeah, but
they go on to lead successful lives. They function. They give back to society. but you as a parent, it has affected you personally as well. And down in Florida, you are opening up a facility that gives back to people who have a physical handicap so they can come down there and enjoy some things. Tell us about that. What's the name of it? Where's it going to be? How soon before it opens?
Well, what we're doing, my mission, before I pass, I want to see this. We're well on our way. It was a godsend really to find this land. It's, 80 acres in the Florida wilds, and we are. I mean, I see what Levi is able to do. In alligator season, he goes and hunts alligators. And
He hunts alligators from a wheelchair?
that's the thing. He has a amphibious vehicle, an Argo, goes in the water, he goes fishing, he goes hunting, he goes deer hunting, he goes pig hunting. So we are busy building a place there where we're going to host. It's full. It has 2 full ADA units, and we're going to host other injured kids and hopefully get involved, with the military and stuff as a inspirational place to show other, people, hey, you can still go out there and, do it. So, yeah, so that's our mission. When Levi did get injured, he did tell me, he said, Dad, I think my life's going to be more meaningful because of this injury. So I want to do whatever I can, to help him make that happen.
Larry Wilson, a man who suffered personal tragedy with his son Levi, but they came back. He's leading a full life. You're giving back to the community down there in Florida. And you did have a good career with Fox. I know you don't want me to talk about it, but I want to thank you for being here and sharing your story. And what is the name of the place that you're building so we could either look for it on Instagram or online? Do you have a name picked out for it? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, Levi has a 501c3, nonprofit. It's called Levi's339.org. If anybody just Googles his name, Levi Wasik, the foundation comes up. So, yeah, so Levi's going to get involved too in the shop we're building. My wife and I are basically, doing all the funding and stuff. But the foundation, the money we raise through that will just mostly be spent to buy some equipment to build the stuff that we'll donate and to pay for the people to come. But yeah, so it's Levi's 339.org, and yep, it's going to be a great thing, and it's what I need to do. That's my goal. Yep.
Where is Levi? Is Levi out here today? He was up at the barbecue. Always got an appetite. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Wilson. Thank you so much, Larry. Of course. Did anybody tell me Jimmy Button was here? Nobody said anything. Jimmy's not on my list. We're going to announce the winners of the golf tournament. Why don't you do it? Would you like to do it? Jimmy Button's going to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Button. You hate being on the microphone? All right, you tell me and I'll tell the audience. Okay. If you win, go over to the green tent. You can pick out your prize. In first place, closest to pin number 8, Adam Crum. Closest to pin number 8. Straightest drive, number 9, Adam Frum. Closest to pin 11, Riker Barnes, closest to pin number 11. Go to the green tent, pick out your prize. Longest drive, number 12, Adam Crum. What else do we have? Closest to hole number 13 was Phoenix Button. I'm sorry, Jim. I straightest drive number 16. Adam Crum again. Ricky Sullivan. Ricky Sullivan. Riker Barnes, longest drive number 17. So it's Crum and a few others there. You can go over to the green tents and you can claim your prizes there. Do we have anything else? Top 3 for the golf tournament. There are some prizes and gifts for you there at the green tent. In 3rd place is Larry Wilson, Rick Cassidy, and Bob Sullivan, and Ricky Sullivan too. Okay, that's 3rd place. In 2nd place, we have Phoenix Button, Casey Holcomb, Charles Holcomb, Steve Bauer. Steve Bauer, where are you, Steve? And of course, here's the winners in 1st place: Rex Rinaldi, Trevor Whiting, Riker Barnes, and Scoot Long. Scoot Long. That isn't the name of a pro golfer. I don't know what it is. That's like Shooter McGavin. All right. Pat Richter. Where are you, Pat? Pat Richter, come on up, please. Pat Richter finished 7th in the 125 Nationals in 1977. Yeah. And what's very, very impressive about Pat Richter is, and I often do this, it's not so much where he finished, how he finished, but you got to look around the people who finished well in autocross at times, including when you become a world champion, and Brad Lackey comes to mind. When you look at Brad's career, 10 years looking for a world championship, yes, it's amazing that he won. Look around Brad Lackey's name and see who he raced during those 10 years. Mikey Wilson, Roger DeCoster, of course, Andre Mello. And maybe the comparison was a little bit of a stretch, Pat. But when I look at, you finished 7th, that was behind Laporte, Hanna, Barnett, Glover, and Reed. Fast company. Have a seat and get a couple of questions for you. Don't hit me in the head like that again. I think they hit me. What was it like to be on the Fox team? It was a satellite team, so to speak, at that time. Talk about some of your teammates. How far did you go with that team? Did you travel around the country? Give us a little background of what life was like there in those years. Well, I'll hold the mic. Hey, you want to hold the mic? I rode for KTM the year before, and I lost my ride with them for technical reasons. But anyway, what do you mean technical reason? Come on, let's get down to it. You're not getting a factory ride again. It's all over. You can say KTM was a piece of junk. You can say anything you want. What was the technical reason? Chuck figured out how to make it handle better. And he welded gussets in on the frame and a crossbar underneath the foot pegs, because the open bike would walk in the woods, and the 250 would. And he put it in cyclones when Jim Ganassis did an interview with us, and KTM didn't see the humor talking about their bike. So you don't devolve what you do. That. Thank you for sharing. No, that's really great that you shared that with us. It's something that we all want to know about those stories. The best stories are the ones you can't tell, right? And that certainly was one of them. So let's get back to being on the road with the Fox team and what that was like. And you know something? Here, you hold this. I'm getting tired. Oh, now we get to it. So, no, really, all jokes aside, is that I started with KTM, and we started working with Bob Fox on the air shock, and then Steve with his shocks, and with the KTM. And then when I didn't get the right KTM for the next year, Jeff gave me a call, and actually I started riding a 125 Honda with Keith Brauntrigger, and that was the start of my 125. I always rode open bikes because I could buy an $800 bike and go ride. 125, you got to make it fast. Well, then Jeff gives me a call and says, "Hey, would you be interested in riding a 125 on the Nationals?" So we got together, went and had lunch, and that's where it started. I was their first and only rider, and we started developing the Suzuki 125, and then Bob built the water-cooled head on it. And by that time, we had the air shocks and the
forks working really good. So then we ended up with the idea to go to Hangtown, and Jeff goes, we want to try to finish in the top 10.
When you said about the water-cooled head, we're all familiar with that. That was, of course, something we could purchase afterward. How much of a difference did that make on the bike once you had the water-cooled head on there? And psychologically, were you thinking about the radiator? Were you thinking about the head? Were you thinking about the performance? Or was it just more than obvious the bike was head and shoulders, no pun intended, above anything else you had ridden?
Well, I don't know about it was above and beyond because we rode it, and it added 12 pounds to a 125. And if everybody knows what 125s, that every pound counts. And I think at the time work Hondas were like 175 or something, and mine was over 200. So after Hangtown, about the third or fourth race of the Nationals, we took it off. So I think the weight was more against us than what we could benefited.
So the end didn't justify the means on that, but I bet you the suspension made a difference.
Oh, heck yeah. And we actually, before we started that, we found out that we went too much travel. You got to remember, we all started at 5 inches of travel and 4 inches of travel. And if I remember right, we went over 12 inches on the rear, and the 125, it was too much. Too much. So, yeah, so then we went to Hangtown, and from there we did exceptionally well as far as we were concerned. We should have won it, and we lost the radiator hose, and I had 9 seconds lead on 45 minutes and 2 laps to go, and I lost it. So, but I got second overall, so we were way ahead of schedule.
Director, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us. And you know what? I haven't been asking everyone, but I should be asking more often because that's why we're here for the Road to Recovery. If you'd like to say a few words about Road to Recovery, that would be wonderful.
I would actually, for me, I was injured. That's why I quit. I didn't have any insurance. There was no means for that. It was all out of yourself. So this sort of a program is unbelievable, mainly for people that are privateers that don't have that ability. And I really like what Larry said is it's the support, mental support in somebody that gets hurt is as much as important as the money dollar said. So that whole system works.
Director, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Mike. Where's Dana Waxham? Dana Waxham. Are you here? There he is. Some impressive career finishes in the top 10. Dana Waxham, a NorCal guy, Motocross Fox team member. Dana, thanks for joining us today. Have a seat. I want to say we'll be right back after this message, but it's not that really pleasant way to go. Tell us about some of your favorite tracks. What bikes did you have before the Fox bike? How it made a difference in the way you approach the race that day. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, to hear Larry and to see everybody here supporting Road to Recovery, wow, awesome. Happy everybody could be here. And, I'm not sure why I'm up here. There's a lot of guys that were here before me, Northern California. We got our Mark Gibsons, Billy DePrados. The list is endless, so it's really an honor to be here. Be part of Fox's team. What an honor, Jeff and Bob, when they both took me to lunch for the first time, that was just awesome, man. It is awesome. It's a memory I'll never forget. But the guys from Loomis here that I rode for before Fox, Gene's Automotive, Bobby, Steve, Les, made these shirts, and Donnie's here, and Tom Stover, and this is just awesome to be here. Jeff Watts is here, and I know Donnie Cantalupi. I wish they were both up here with me. But just good memories of racing so many tracks, and it's been a few years, since we've been here. Dave Doherty was here, first annual, and I'm just glad to see so many people here this year that should have been here on the first annual, and glad they're here, Joe. Yeah, I'm glad you're here too. Thank you.
I'm happy to be here to do this once again. How far east did you go with the Fox team? I got it.
I was injured after the 4th National, and things changed. My career went a different direction, but had a good finish at Hangtown. We were tied for a top 5. and it was just awesome. You know, Sears Point. I had been as far as West Virginia for the amateur nationals, and you know, good memories with so many people. So many people. Yeah.
Dana Waxon, thank you so much for joining us today. And your name is, of course, etched in history with the Motocross Fox team. So it might have ended on the fourth national for you, but it all goes on. Thank you so much. Dave Arnold, Team Honda mechanic, 25 championships to his credits, and much, much more. Dave, would you join me for a minute? Dave Arnold, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, they've got no place to be. Dave Arnold. Oh, I was right. It is 25 AMA Supercross and Motocross Championships. Not so bad. Not too bad at all. You had a lot. Well, you had some good riders, but you know, if those guys can't finish a race. First question: how does one become a factory mechanic? I'm wondering that. I mean, do you get a call? Are you just a good mechanic at a shop, and somebody says, "Hey, come over to Honda and be a tuner for some of the fastest racers in the industry"? How does that work? What was your, what was the entrance for you to get into Team Honda to become a mechanic?
Well, for me, they gave me a shoebox full of a transmission that was unassembled, and I had to put it all together. But among some other things, but I think it's an interesting question because the relationship the mechanic has with the rider and the mechanic has with the engineers and management within the team is pretty important. So his personality and working relationship is really important, and so sometimes the rider's comfortable and the rider wants to bring his mechanic with him, and sometimes it's word of mouth. I think I called some guys that I really respected in the industry. Mike McAndrews is here today, and him and I always got along. And sometimes you just want to call somebody that he really understands those elements. And he recommended Ricky Ziegfelder work for him at his suspension shop in New Hampshire. And then Ricky went on to be, among other things, a lot of it's word of mouth, and a lot of it is, just the right guy, kind of the writer sometimes bringing in somebody he's really comfortable with.
Now, you've got the 25 championships. Marty Smith, of course, maybe the most famous one, but not the only one. So who are some of the other racers that you were a wrench for? And tell us about those guys.
Those guys, it was Marty mainly in the 70s, but John Rosenstiel was his mechanic for his two 125 national titles in 74 and 75. I was actually the proud honor of losing that title in 76. And then we almost won the 250 title in later in 76, and he won the 500 title in 77. Then he got injured, and there was a bit of a dry spell for Honda, I think, in the middle of Yamaha bringing the monoshock and Suzuki with the full floater. And then I think we got a lot of factory support going into the 80s with HRC. So from that point, we kind of had to build our effort because the bikes we had to work on the riders, we had to work on the bikes, we had to work on the team structure. O'Mara rose to the top, Bailey rose to the top. I mean, Ricky Johnson, George Holland. I mean, we had quite a run there. Daryl Schultz won a championship early on. He was a Northern California guy. Larry Wassik's here. I haven't run into him yet, but there was a lot of great experiences. One of them was when we went to Mount Morris, Pennsylvania, and Daryl was in the car, and I think Larry was in the back seat, and Larry was just crying, reaming Daryl up and down that how come it was so easy for him, and he rode more and he trained more, and but anyway, it was pretty fun. And Daryl's just being all cool. So,
Dave, you're being a little humble here. I think you were also in Europe with the legendary Roger DaCosta at some point in your career. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So I mean, during the '70s, I mean, everybody here knows with the Trans Ams and the Europeans coming over. I mean, and there was a lot of American mechanics, me included. That I mean, the premier form of racing was in Europe, and I really wanted to go to Europe and see that. I mean, their tracks were rougher, and I think there was more direct factory involvement for actual R&D, and bike evolution. So, but anyway, when I heard that, and Marty is coming off of an injury and his relationship with Honda was falling apart. I don't even know the details of that, but then there was a test that the head guy in Japan, Miyakoshi, he really liked Roger. He tried to get Roger involved with Honda for open class bike development around 75, and there's parts all over the shop that none of it really worked, but and that relationship didn't mature then. But end of 79, there was a test that we did, and man, we had so many engineers and bikes and parts, and so that was the beginning of water cooling and linkage suspension and cartridge forks and a bunch of things like that. So a mutual friend of Rogers in mind, Bruce Burness, he mentioned that Rogers' former mechanic, Eula, Swedish guy, wasn't going to be with him for the following season when he was racing for Honda. So the very last day of the test, and I knew Roger from being over for Trans Ams and Marty and Hannah being competitive and him congratulating or whatever. But I went over, I was kind of nervous, and I begged him for a job to work with him in Europe, and so we ended up doing that. I lived with him for 3 or 4 months till his wife came over and traveled all the countries. It was a great experience because I wasn't as sharp as a tack at some of the academic stuff in school, except for shop class. But when you go to Europe and you see all that stuff, it becomes more clear where some of the hotels are bombed in Germany and things like that.
You were nice enough to give me an interview for my Vintage Motocross Q&A show. And you told a story about Roger. So it was a public story. You already said it. I'm wondering if you'll share it again, though. There was a guy getting a little loud in front of Roger while he was watching a race in Europe. You remember that? You guys are going to like this. You're going to say, that Joe, you got to get him for every event. What happened when the guy got a little loud and Roger was trying to watch the race? Take us through the story.
Well, I mean, Roger, he's a celebrity in Europe, right? But for us to go over there with an all-American crew, and it was sort of when the AMA couldn't get Hannah and Howerton and Glover, the top guys, to work together. And in any case, so I think it was Dick Miller called Roger, and we ended up I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. In my mind, after being in Europe in 1980, I'm like, we do not have a snowball's chance of beating these guys at Lommel, because it's a rough track, and there's some really good sand riders in Europe. But in any case, and we're at this race, and it wasn't a dominant race, but our guys did really well. I mean, O'Mara, in local Southern California Indian Dunes guy, but he had won a USGP 125. Chuck Sun was a former national 500 champion. Bailey was coming on to his own. He might have been the next year. So there was Laporte, was a good sand rider, and might have been Gibson the first year. So in any case, and we didn't have computers. Now when you go to these races, there's a running toll of who's doing what. And so Roger and I are sitting with all these papers trying to figure out where the English are, the Germans are, and the Belgians are, and the Italians. And well, where's this guy? Where's that guy? So in any case, there was guys in Belgium, they like to drink beer as much as anybody. And they're right behind us. And they're like, hey, they don't really know who we are. And we're trying to hunch down, but we're between the snow fence and the spectators and the track, and so these guys are like, hey, in Flemish, so I don't really know what they're saying, and they go, sit down, and so Roger, we try to hunch down a little bit, and then these guys have drank a little bit, so they tell us to sit down a little bit more abruptly, get out of his way, and Roger turns around and he goes, hey, just shut up, and because we're taking this serious and things are pretty close, and so the guy continues to yell at us, and Roger turns around and grabs the guy and smacks him directly in the face, and I was like in shock. I go, it's not normal that, team guys are supposed to create a good image and not really smack on the spectators. But then this guy's buddy, he's like, hey, there's a Roger. And so then it was like this big honor that this guy was bleeding in the face, and then he wanted his autograph.
Dave, I'm so happy you told that story. I'll never forget what you told me in our interview. And sometimes when people talk over the phone, they don't realize how many people are listening. So I'm really grateful that you told the story here. Would you like to say a little bit about Road to Recovery before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Charlie and Steve Simons. Honestly, the Northern California, they have such a community and racers that we've seen over the years for the Trans Ams, but they have a lot of real enthusiast club atmosphere up here. And but it was also, the work that Jimmy and his mom and others have done for road to recovery is such an important role for the sport to help people through hard times. There is an injury rate in this and other sports and that's the main reason. It's such a good cause, so I'm glad to be a part of it.
Dave Arnold, ladies and gentlemen. Dave, thank you so much. Trey Jaworski. Is Trey Jaworski here? Trey. Trey Jaworski. Raise your hand. Where is he? Here he is.
Look out.
Three-time Texas cross-country champion, 73 to 82. He rode. He won hundreds of races, 125, 250, and 500 classes. Legends and Heroes inductee in 2013. And I got to know, how did you become the Mexican national champion in 74, Trey Jaworski?
Yeah.
Have a seat. And where's my beautiful wife, Susie, with that water? Where'd she go? All right.
You love the bar.
Okay.
In the bar.
I don't know what's got me more confused. And in this day and age, especially with crowds of this age, I'll just say, what's a Polish guy doing in Texas winning a Mexican national championship?
There was a lot of money.
How did all that happen? Actually, it was, you told me a little bit about Carabella and Oklahoma. Why don't we start there and we can take it from there.
Well, in Tulsa, there was some guys that were the Carabella importer, basically. And, I'd see those guys at the races every now and then. Where they come up to me one day and they said, "Hey, you ought to come down to Mexico City. There's a big race down there." And I said, "Well, I don't know. That's a long ways to go."
How old were you when this was going on?
I was 16. I just got my pro license in June. And so we ended up, my dad said, "Okay, because they said, okay, we'll pay your way down there. We'll pay for your hotel. And, you'll make enough money to get home." I said, okay. So we get down there, get to the hotel. The first thing, the Carabella guys come over, take us straight to the Carabella factory, giving us the cook's tour of the place. And they're like, "Man, we've got all this great bikes and they do so well down here." And I said, "I hope you're not trying to get me to ride these." I said, I've already got a ride, and I know mine's not going to break. So, they went on, and finally they gave up, and I ended up riding the Kawasaki's in the race, and I won all three classes that day, and it was quite an event.
So you never really became a Carabella rider. You went down there and you won your championship on your Kawasaki.
Right. They kind of brought me down there on the premise that I would like what they had to offer, because they offered to pay me a lot more than I was getting, but I was thinking,
What you're saying is that you're a 16-year-old kid with a factory Kawasaki contract and they've given you 3 motorcycles?
oh yeah, you know who Wyman Pretty is? Right. Well, Wyman rode for Kawasaki Central, which was a distributor of Kawasaki. And so when I turned 16, Wyman, I went to Texas and raced a lot against Wyman and all the Dallas guys. Well, the Kawasaki people, they kept coming to my dad because I kept telling them no, I like riding the CZ. And finally they talked my dad into it and, said, "Hey, we're going to give you this. We're going to do this for you. We'll give you bikes. You'll get a mechanic and, we'll kind of pay your way. And Wyman's going to be your mentor." Well, Wyman and I got along real well. I mean, he really taught me how to start. And I don't know if anybody's ever looks at much vintage racing over the last 10 years. I pretty much get to start.
Yeah, you definitely do. And you put that Kawasaki out front. And I'm thinking about those years that you were with Kawasaki and mentioning Wyman Pretty of Texas. Was Weiner around at that time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Weiner was around. But they rode for the race team, and we rode for like the distributor in Grand Prairie, Texas, which that was before all Kawasaki came to one. They had a distributor, which is owned by Masick, which is an outside
Corporation. And in New Jersey, they had another import or a distributor there before Kawasaki dealer network was put together. But you know, one of the best things was I rode the Kawasaki in 75, and you know, the magazine said, you know, it'd have been a great bike in 73. So they had warehouses full of them. Well, at New Orleans, there was 2 Kawasaki's in the field at they called it the Battle of New Orleans. Had 5 guys mathematically could win the championship. Well, Simmons and I, we were the only 2 Kawasaki's. He runs 3 and I run 8. My bonus is more than his. He goes, he goes, I can't believe they paid you more than me. I go, they have warehouses full of those things I rode they can't sell.
You were Kawasaki's best salesman that year, no question about it.
Well, you know, it rocked along till 76, and then we kind of got sideways, but I finished off my career with them.
And you're still here, and you're in the Legend and Heroes Hall of Fame. You're still out there burning gas on vintage bikes all over the country. So I want to thank you for taking some time to speak with us.
Yeah.
Trey Joystick. Where's Jeff Ward? Jeff Ward. Jeff Ward.
He's overrated.
Hey, what? Hey, Bauer, why don't you come up here and answer some questions about Jeff Ward? All right. Billy Grossi. We'll wait for Jeff Ward. In the meantime, Bill Grossi, why don't you come up? Kind of your host, your local hero, a favorite rider of so many guys growing up. Bill Grossi. Nice round of applause for Bill Grossi, please.
Yeah.
And as I promised, Bill, there will be no questions about that and the Carabao. Why don't we do this?
No, we're good buddies, man.
Well, then, you know what?
You can hang up. You can hang here.
Do you want me to ask questions? Bill, do you want to say some things about the event first and what's going on and road to recovery and things like that before we get into any questions?
Well,
I'm just glad you invited me.
all right, man. I'm glad you came all the way from Oklahoma. So obviously, it's great to see so many people turn up, show up for such a good cause, road to recovery, and it's such a great cause. I've been injured before. That had a lot of help on the side. Brad, Jim Pomeroy. So just to be here and seeing everybody pitch in.
You're from this area, Bill, Santa Cruz, beautiful place. There's probably a lot of places that you recall riding as a kid down here. Why don't you tell us about some of the tracks where you used to ride and some of the adventures that you had back then?
Well, I started off, I learned how to ride here at the Viega Park, Honda 55, step through. They used to have an oval track, and I would go around that oval until my bike ran out of gas. So I kind of learned to ride here. It's always been just, you know, my brother raced here in 1968. So it just has a lot of great memories. I'm not a golfer whatsoever, but I did hear a couple good stories from Rob Cadwallader about Bob and him coming up before the course was finished and riding at night, tearing this place up a little bit.
Yeah, Bill, you've had, I guess a lot of people do remember your time at Honda. I remember seeing first year at Unadilla on the Honda. You went on, of course, to Kawasaki, and you had a stint there with Suzuki as well. Who gave you your first contract? Was there any pay involved? And tell us about what it's like. I mean, it's not as glamorous as some people may think. So tell us about getting stuffed in those trucks, driving across the country, and what that was like.
Yeah, well, fortunate to have an older brother that was famous and one of the top Americans. But yeah, when I started off, my first sponsor was Saks. They gave me a bike and parts. And then Montesa kind of got me going, Husqvarna, but a lot of it was basically bikes and parts. I really didn't get much help till 1973. my friend Jojo and some of his buddies talked me into going to see Brian Farnsworth and asked for a ride. So, Brian's like, well, you want to drive a truck? We can pay a per diem and give you like $50 a race or something. And I had to work on my own bike at the time. So that's kind of how it got going. And there was a lot of adventures traveling. I was like 17, 18 years old and driving a truck across the US and trying to follow guys like Al Baker and JoJo, Tom Rapp, the whole taco team. It was great to be young and into that, the group. I mean, we were like, all the teams were friends, everybody traveled together. We'd all end up at Gary Simmicks's house, in Ohio and, ride mini bikes at night through trails. And I mean, it was really close camaraderie friends. It was great.
Was it you or your brother Bobby, I think, with Semick, that they were racing mini bikes and got hurt and lost? That wasn't you, that was Bobby, wasn't it?
That was, Bob and Gary. Yeah, they both got hurt on XR 75s and they both lost their rides at Husqvarna.
Oh.
Tell us a little bit more about Road to Recovery. What do you think about what they're doing out there? We all know it's great, but from your perspective, a little insight on Road to Recovery.
Well, obviously, it's a great cause. It's unfortunate. Motocross is a dangerous sport. We get hurt. Most of us get up and heal. Some of us have major injuries, paralysis, and to have this foundation help guys that need it, and families, and the support that comes afterwards also is just incredible.
It's a wonderful event. Thank you for it. It seems like you're a big part of this. And when everybody comes down here, I know from 2021, everybody wanted to meet Bill Grassi, of course, everyone else along the way. But, it's your backyard. And we really feel honored to have you here with us. Bill Grassi, ladies and gentlemen. Can anybody find Jeff Ward? Jeff Ward? He left? Okay, if anybody sees him. In the meantime, Tom Rapp. Tom Rapp, are you busy?
Get him, Joe, get him.
If you have to go to the bathroom, anybody go. It'll take Rapp 15 minutes to get up. There you go.
Hey.
All the way from Montana, 3 planes, an Uber, a rent-a-car, long-time Bultaco rider and all-around great guy, Tom Rapp. Tom, thanks for joining us here today. Have a seat. What is that, lemon? Nice. Yeah. Very nice. Now, you're known as a Bultaco rider primarily. Talk about, and they said you were always a threat in Southern California, whether it was Indian Dunes or whatever track it was down there. Was it always Bultaco for you? How did that happen? Where did you get your start? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Joe, first of all, I'd like to thank Charlie Halcomb for inviting me down. And I had to come, even if it's from Montana, because I know it's a great cause. And I wish I would have had this organization when I got hurt, because we had no support at all other than the doctor. So I'd like to appreciate all that and all the effort that these people did. So anyway, I was racing Hodakas with Gary Bailey, because that's all we had were Hodakas until Pentness came in. And Lars Larson came over with his leathers, and we're just totally in awe of all this almond stuff. That's just the most awesome stuff in the world, right? So anyway, Marcel Wirtz came over with a 125 Bultaco, and he was racing the Interams at Hopetown and at Westlake. And when he went back to Belgium, Doug Yerke's shop, Bultaco shop in, I think, Van Nuys, offered me this 125 Bultaco. And after I got off the Hodaka and got on that thing, it was like a top fuel racer, man. It had no torque at all, but it had nothing but RPMs. And at Saddleback Park and some of these really fast tracks, nobody could keep up with me. It wasn't me, the bike. And so that's kind of how I got my start. And then Bultaco asked me to go on the road in 1970. And my folks said, no, you have to get your diploma. So I waited till 1970, got my diploma. And next thing I know, I signed a contract and I'm on the road with Russ Powell and Ron Stockman with these bikes. And they never paid us. We just had a gas card and a PDM or whatever they call it. They're like $18 a day. And that's where I ended up meeting up with Brad Lackey and Jimmy Weiner, Sonny DeFeo. We were just young kids with long hair. And we were just riding around looking at these Europeans lap us 3 times in one race. You know, it was amazing, man. I mean, it was such a learning curve. We didn't know anything about training or any equipment. We had to work on our own bikes. I had spare motors because I didn't know how to rebuild a motor. So I just put the motor in the frame and then move on. So that's kind of how it's all started with Bultaco. And they were very good to me. I was very loyal to them. They treated me very well. And Doug Schwarma of Champion Frames built a chromoly frame for me. And Al Anders did the road work on the motor. And Daryl Bassani gave me a Bassani pipe. And that bike was so fast. It was unbelievable, man. I raced the Interam at Indian Dunes and almost won the race, except my chain fell off in the 3rd moto. But overall, if it would have been a 2-moto race, I would have won the race. And it was a great adventure for a young kid like me.
So how many years did you ride for Bultaco, and what was your last year with them?
I started in 1970, and Bultaco went out of business in 1976, I believe. And that's when I quit riding Bultaco. I got injured. I broke the vendicular bone in my wrist.
You broke your what?
The vendicular bone. Oh, come on. This is a family show, Joe. So anyway, it's the same bone that Ricky Johnson broke, and he pretty much ended his career. And so anyway, I got a call from the KTM place, and they said, we have a bike for you out of Woodland Hills. It's called Dirt Factory. And I go, okay. And we have another rider. And I said, well, what's his name? He says, Danny Chandler. And I know from watching Danny, it was quite an adventure with him. They basically hired me to kind of mellow him out a little bit, because Danny was 150 or 0. There was nothing in between. And they considered him kind of a smooth rider and experienced. So for 2 years, I rode with Danny, and we rode at Mammoth and around the area. And then after that, I pretty much quit racing and moved on to another occupation.
Now, you're all the way out here from Montana, and you're a farmer, so to speak. You grow mushrooms. It was interesting when I was speaking to you yesterday that you actually went to other countries to alter people about this agricultural thing. Tell us about that. What country you've been to, and are we got low batteries here? Or are we good? No, I think we're okay. Tell us about that.
Well, after I retired, I needed to find some other occupation. I didn't want to be in the motorcycle industry. I was burned out and all the time. So anyway, I built a mushroom farm, Watsonville, and so I started learning how to grow mushrooms with my friend. And after about 10 years, we started a consulting business, and we traveled around the world, basically, Argentina, Chile, Canada, teaching people how to actually grow mushrooms profitably. And it turned out to be a wonderful adventure, man, for me, and very rewarding. I did it for 41 years, and wasn't home in Montana very much. But after that period of time, I came home and we started our own business, and been happy, and just so happy to be living in Montana. I'm not much about being around a herd of people and people telling me what to do. So Montana's kind of a free state, and you can feel like you want and do what you want.
Tom Rapp, Bultaco rider, Odaka rider, mushroom grower. Thank you for being here. Jim Turner. Where's Jim Turner? Jim, please come join us. Jim Turner, two-time Canadian MX champion. Three times. It says here two-time Canadian champion, 250, 500. You're not just adding championships as we go, are you? I mean, thank you for joining us. You are a big part of the Fox team as well. And how did you wind up going into Canada and winning a national championship? Let's talk about that first.
You have all evening or no? Yeah, so I started in 75 on the national circuit and was racing and doing pretty well. And then Suzuki came to me at the end of the year and they didn't have a factory ride for me here, so they offered me one in Canada. So that's how I ended up there as a full factory rider, factory bikes.
Factory Suzuki. Now, was Fox part of that?
Fox was not involved at that time. That was a full factory Suzuki effort.
Okay. Now, we were talking, and I discovered that you also, because of Fox, you did wind up racing in Europe a bit. Tell us about your time in Europe, what classes you raced there, and what life was like over in Europe.
Yeah. So after I was in Canada, and then in '78, I got an offer to race Fox, the Suzuki 370, the Nationals here. So I raced that. And then somewhere during the end of the year, Jeff said, "What do you want to do next year?" And I said, "You know what I really want to do is go race in Europe." And somewhere near the end of the year, he said, "Do you want to go?" And I go, "Yes." And so that's how that kind of came about, going to Europe and racing for Fox there.
What races did you compete in Europe?
So I was entered in the 250 World Championships, and I raced a good portion of them, not all of them.
And what year was that?
1979.
How long did the factory Suzuki contract last, and where did it go from there?
But this was, the Suzuki contract was just 76 in Canada. So 79 in Europe was with Fox.
What kind of bike?
A Honda.
Okay. So that bike was, of course, fully equipped with their suspension?
Yeah, that was a full effort by Fox. We had the new forks and the swing arms they made and the pipes. And Keith Bontrager was my mechanic there, and he did all the porting to it.
Now, you mentioned Keith Bontrager. Is he here? I asked at least 2 or 3 times. Is that him? Yeah. Or is that guy just saying it's Keith Bontrager? I don't know. Keith, why don't you come up here while we have Jim here and try to get a little.
I've seen Jim for like 20 years.
Well, you haven't? Why don't you come up here, have a seat? Come on. Keith, your name was mentioned a lot when people were talking about Fox and you being a mechanic for Jim. And you also sold, you had a lot to do. It seems, let me just give you people a little background, because I wasn't really all that familiar with what you were doing and how involved you were with the team. And obviously, I'm not much of a note taker either. What?
As a racer, mostly I fell off.
That's why I'm an announcer and not an eraser. All right, you sold parts, helmets, jerseys. You're in the mountain bike hall of fame. Now I remember. Okay, let's talk about the mini bike thing first. It says here in '65 you started putting lawnmower engines in mini bikes. I mean, that's very, very interesting. And tell us, I mean, what in '65 inspired you to do that?
Poverty. And I really wanted to have one, so figured out how to do it on my own. My dad sold electric plants, and he brought home a bunch of Kohler engines from electric plants blown up and said, "There you go." So I started with that and went from there.
Now, you also went on to get very, very involved in cycling and with bicycles too. You built frames for those as well. tell us about that. And I don't think it's a poverty situation. And look, I'm hoping the story goes somewhere to where you didn't do it because of poverty. I hope you made money somewhere along the line in this deal.
Well, actually, one of the things that's said pretty often is if you want to make a small fortune in the bicycle industry, start with a large one. So that I got into the bike biz after working for Jeff and Bob, and that was, well, I was successful. I had most of it done. But then after that, it was just like solve problems. I went to school, studied physics. They turned me onto that and started building stuff. And sold the company to Trek, and then went on from there.
Another thing that really was intriguing when I was doing a little research on this, it said that between 75 and 81, that you designed, built, and tuned, of course, motocross bikes, but road racing bikes and drag racing motorcycles as well. What class of drag race bike did you build?
I worked for a company called Genco, which worked on Kawasaki. And we built H2 750 Kawasaki's that went 150 miles an hour in 9 seconds or something like that. On it, it was in Fremont, so we raced on the Fremont drag strip. And I was racing motocross at the time, but I was learning how to make engines really fast, which, well, then eventually ended up working with her and did porting and exhaust pipes for him. And then I worked for Randy Cleek in Europe. So another one of those things, you make a few connections and you put your effort into it, and things could work out well.
Thank you, Keith Bontrager. Thank you, Jim, so much. Thank you both for joining us. Is it 2 or 3 championships? Come on now. Okay, it's 3. Thank you both so much for joining me here today. Did Chuck Miller make it? Chuck Miller? Chuck Miller? No? Steve Stashevsky. He's not on my list, but I want to call him up here. Steve Stashevsky. Come on, Steve. Steve, of course, was the mechanic in 1982 for Bad Lackey's World Championship year. He's also worked for Factory Makeup. And just an all-around great guy. Let's have a nice round of applause for Steve Stashevsky. Steve, thanks for joining me today. From what Brad told me, you guys, in the year of the World Championship, 1982, you took a little bit of a different approach with your trip to Europe. You went over much earlier than you did in the previous 9 years. Why was that? And I mean, obviously it worked out, but what was the strategy behind that?
This was 82.
You won in 82.
You know, 82, we actually stayed home and we rode the Golden State Series. So I did a lot more development here where I had access to machinists and different things that I did to the bike. So it made it much easier than trying to get it done in Europe, even though I had been in Europe for years prior.
I stand corrected. You didn't go early. You actually stayed home, developed more, and went over there a little bit later. And that had a lot to do, I think. Well, obviously you were very successful when you were there.
Well, yeah, we had a lot going for us. We were just, using Simon's forks, and we could relate to things. There was quite a few changes I felt at the time, even though Steve had already had them for some years prior. But we found some things that could be better, and Steve took care of it. And like I say, when we got to Europe, we were pretty much dialed. Our bikes, when we got there, France was the first race. I think that picture of Brad is in France, and I only say that because he doesn't have the Flaine helmet yet. But everything was there. Steve was there. We got a little tongue lashing from the Japanese. I had a boost bottle on the bike. They said no forks, no boost bottle, no Lackey seat. No, it's not a Lackey, it's a Suzuki. We compromised with taking the boost bottle off. So.
Before the Suzuki years, you also had some success with Herbert Schmidt and Mako. Tell us about that. Were you over in Germany? Did you help develop some things there? What was your relationship with Mako and Herbie at that time?
Well, Mako at the time, I was very, very fortunate. In high school, I was making chain guides and selling them to the local Mako dealer, Mike's Racing Center. I was working with a guy, Billy Payne and Tom Rapp and Bob Mester and all, like I say, they talk about a group of people. If we didn't see each other on Sundays, we'd see each other on Thursday nights at Ascot or what have you. And I became the service manager right out of high school from the Mississippi West. So I was kind of young. I worked with all the magazines. I think I said, Jody and Dick Miller, Rick Simon. So part of my job was to go out and test ride with them. I wasn't a writer. I kind of became a writer, but I watched for a long, long time. Very good friends with Doc Johnson, the people like that, and Herbert. I think it was 77. I worked for Noyce at Sears Point and Saddleback, and then 77 I worked for Schmitz, and he asked me if I'd come over to Europe and work for him. So, I had been to Europe, been to the factory. I'd always try to time it. I'd go to the factory for 2 weeks out of the year and always try to time where I could get there and see a GP that was close, because the factory is very small and not real accommodating. So I'd always hitch a ride with a rider or something to go to one of the GPs. And we had a great time. Herbert was a little bit different. Like I say, Adolf was a great friend of mine. The Mesh family was very interesting.
How so? The Mesh family was very interesting. How so?
Well, first of all, there was Hans Mesh, which was a great rider, a 250 GP rider. But the factory, his older brother, was in charge of the factory as far as production and what have you. So everything you heard, I was full of questions. Well, my brother says, and Herbert and I had done a few things because he was all on board. We had, miter fork tubes, Wheel Smith laced wheels, all the problems that we had, we kind of tried to bring that was good, which every year I'd bring to the factory and say, hey, this is working over here. They didn't want to hear about it, So Herbert was all aboard and all about it. We had won the German championship halfway through, beat Adolf for the first time, and certainly spanked Hans and everything else. And one day in the my greatest thing for Mako factory, besides working with Herbert, finishing 4th in the world that year, was when Hans Mesh came to me in the workshop and said, do you think I could try a pair of Herbert shocks? And I said, you need to check with your brother. Now, he didn't get the joke, but I did, and it was worth it right then. So,
Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time to come up here and tell us a few stories about Suzuki and Mako and your time on the road back then. And Kawasaki, too. All right, let's have a seat. Let's go to Kawasaki. Come on. You sure? Quick one with Kawasaki. Come on.
At the end of the 1978 Grand Prix season, I lived in Germany. I had a little apartment. I had Herbert over for dinner, Graham Noyce, which I'd known from Mako and I'd worked for him before, and Brad. So I had 3 offers that to go into the 79 season. So I started with, well, I got to go with Herbert, Mako. I'm a Mako guy, but they didn't want to pay. And then Graham was a little bit too wild for me, and I was pretty wild. So Brad convinced me that, they've got this great new bike and everything else. And when we got to Japan, I was floored. I mean, they wouldn't even let him ride it. Test rider must ride it first, this new Unitrack. It did not go up and down. It looked cool. The first test drive, both Japanese riders, one broke his arm and one broke his leg on probably the smallest bump you could find. So I told Brad, don't even ride it. Let's go back to the factory. And we went from there. So that was that. So interesting year developing the Unitrack.
Now, that bike did break in half a couple of times for a couple of different people. How'd they get that straightened out?
Well, it broke in half for us, but I wasn't the first Cowie to break in half. And in his frame, if you look under the, I basically just copied the Mako frame. The first thing they asked me when I got to the factory in Japan, they said, do you have blueprint for Mako? And I said, yes, right here in my head. What do you want to know? They weren't that sophisticated. Yes, we had blueprints, but, I changed the head angle and rake and trail and what have you. So I had changed underneath the tank instead of their normal press plates. I had 2 things that looked very similar to Mako. I couldn't convince them to use a double down tube. So we went with the single down tube offset exhaust port, but it broke in Sweden one year.
Now, I did hear that factories would go out and buy their competitors' bikes and take them apart and look at them. How accurate is that? Did every factory do it?
I believe they did, and I will tell you, Brad's 82 Suzuki was identical bore stroke, crankshaft weight as a Mako.
How about that? A little inside information from Steve Stashevsky. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Great organization. Dick Miller. Did Dick Miller return yet? Not yet?
Chuck Miller. Chuck Miller.
Chuck Miller's on his way home. Steve Bowers here. Hey, you want to hear a good story? I asked a guy to do my Vintage Motocross Q&A show. He agrees to give me an interview. The first question I asked him is, how'd you get involved in motocross? And he says to me, and you're going to hear his voice in just a second, I didn't even want a motorcycle. I wanted a raccoon. Steve Bauer, come on up there. Tell us a couple of stories. Come on. Yeah, I want you to tell the raccoon story. And you were also a test rider. You were also a very successful support rider down in Southern California. No, they were supporting you. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Bauer, a great guy. And you know what? We're going to talk about a charity that he works for too. And we'll get down to that. First, let's talk about, and tell me he doesn't sound just like you. Tell us about the raccoon.
First, I just want to talk about this bag of swag right next to you there.
What do you got?
Well, I played today in the golf tournament with Jimmy Button's son, Phoenix, and Charlie Halcomb, my good friend, old buddy, who I think he's part of this whole thing, and his son. And we got second place. Got a bag, a whole bunch of stuff. And so I was looking, believe me, I was looking for Miller because I just wanted to like strut in front of him with my new backpack and shit. But anyway, yeah, it was good.
Now, your dad was a dentist. Nobody wanted to ride a motorcycle. They didn't really want you riding one, and you didn't even want a motorcycle. You wanted a raccoon. Tell me about that. Come on, tell everybody.
All right, so yeah, the raccoon. So I really did want a raccoon really bad. I lived Riverside, and on the edge of the river bottom. I was kind of like a sort of a jungle kid growing up. I mean, that's what we did. We went down there. We had tree forts and shit, and it was good. And Riverside was a really good place to grow up. And so it took me a long time, and I finally talked to my folks into letting me have a raccoon. And yeah, it's not that funny. Raccoons they're not what you think. So anyway, my mom took me to the pet store, and I had it all staked out. And then we got there, and I'm like, yeah. We had it all set up, and I go to the store with this raccoon, and I mean, I was gonna go home with a freaking raccoon, and it was a big deal, man. I mean, they're like cute and shit. Yeah. And so I go to, the guy says, okay, yeah, so here's the raccoon. This raccoon was like some sort of abominable monster. The thing attacked me, attacked my mom, crawled up me. It was the gnarliest thing ever. I was clawed up. And that was that for the raccoon deal. It was pretty disturbing. I may even still be traumatized by it. Yeah. So
when motorcycles were dangerous and raccoons were supposed to be safe.
Motorcycles are dangerous, and we can all see that by all the people that are limping around here. I mean, we all got stars to show for that. That's for freaking sure. Yeah, it took me a long time, a lot of begging. I earned my motorcycle, my first motorcycle. Yeah, oh yeah. My dad was a dentist, like you said, and he to this day I've never owned a skateboard because they wouldn't let me have a skateboard. No way. All the time, because the skateboards, especially back then, if you hit a little rock, those things that hit the skids, and so he was always getting emergency calls, having to go down and fix his kids' teeth and stuff. So yeah, but and I kind of lucked out because his dental assistant was a lady named Dagmar Reese, and she had a son named David Reese. Some of you may know David. He was a manager at Malcolm Smith's Motorcycles for years, and he was back then. There was really no motocross in SoCal. There was, but I mean, it was mostly TT and flat track, and Adelano. They had Half Mile and Paris, Elsinore, and these guys. Flat trackers are gnarly. Class C guys, they get all my respect. And David was a pretty fast expert and stuff, and so I kind of had so when I finally talked my folks into getting me a motorcycle or letting me have one, the first thing they said was that you don't even think about racing it.
What was the first bike?
It was a SL 100 Honda. Yeah. And I was shocked that I took many years of hammering them hard to break it down. And people say, "Oh, yeah, I threw a newspaper to get the first begging you, dude. I earned that fucking buck. There was a lot of begging, a lot of. The only way that I finally talked to him to let me race was because it was Corona Race that was having the very first motocross out there. They had cars racing there a lot, but they hadn't had a motocross yet. And there was an article in the local paper saying that motorcycle, it said in there that motocross, the average speed is like 20 miles an hour, or 25 miles an hour. And yes, that was what I needed. And I got my in, and they let me race, and yeah.
Steve, you were a test rider for Cycle World magazine and some other magazines as well. How many years were you a test rider for?
Oh shoot, I was a test rider at Cycle World from 1977 to 2000, yeah, 1984 maybe.
Okay, and did you test ride street bikes as well as motocross bikes?
You know what? I could have taken any street bike home I wanted, but you know what? I knew that my stupid racer mentality would get me killed on a street bike. Yeah, and I never really came to enjoying street bikes till much later, like, you know.
So we're all here. Nobody's getting a contract. It doesn't matter what happens anymore. You were a test rider. What was the biggest piece of shit you ever tested?
The Harley Davidson 250 with a big strap-on tank. Yeah.
Kind of matches the shirt you have on, actually. Kind of like that orange, right? But that thing was a turd, huh?
You know what? Speaking of the shirt, this is a Johnny O. It's a company. It's not our Johnny O, but Johnny O'Donnell. And it's a great clothing company. And my girlfriend Nancy is, yeah, so she's his assistant. So kind of nice. And you know, it's nice. Inside line.
On a very serious note, Steve, you gave back a lot to the sport of motocross, but you give even more back to a charity called Big Air Kids Fair, part of the Loma Linda Hospital. You put on a show, have put on a show down there, and brought some incredible talent to that hospital every year for some of the kids who may not have a lot of time left. Tell us about that, when you started it, and how we can support that project.
Okay. Yeah, that started. I was gonna say dating a girl that she was a nurse there at Loma Linda Children's Hospital. She worked in the oncology unit, and I was there visiting her one night. Or morning, it was like 2 a.m. And I was looking around, and there's a lot of long faces there. You know, and a lot of long faces, and these kids and their families. And it really struck me that you know, these parents basically they move into the hospital, and you know, if you have a sick kid, you know, we all know that you'd do anything for that child. And so I thought to myself that, you know, maybe at the time I was still working. I always stayed involved in the industry. You know, I wrote for a few magazines for, you know, Cycle News and such, for Racer X and stuff. And I was lucky enough to get Stu Peters hooked me up, Sandra Peters hooked me up with it. People had felled at that time. It was Clear Channel, I think. Case. Anyway, I was a freestyle judge in the original freestyle series, when they very first series. And so I knew those guys, and I thought, well, you know what? These guys are all, I still stayed in touch with all my old sponsors and stuff. And I thought maybe I could bring some of the Supercross guys into town, you know, since they were in town for the Supercross, I could bring them over there to visit the kids. And so I talked to the hospital, and the first 2 years, I just brought some riders. I brought Nate Ramsey and Jeff Emig and Trevor Vines and Danny Smith. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you guys probably know who these guys are. And we just visited the kids. And what was kind of interesting was 2 weeks before that, because I know these kids. In case you guys don't know it, our sport is really niche. It's small. We all think that everybody should know who Ricky Carmichael is. Everybody should know who Jet Lawrence is. But the average person, they don't know. They really don't. They don't give a shit about motorcycles. And so I got a bunch of these bar-to-bar DVDs and CDs. Well, it was actually, at that time, it was videotapes. I dropped them off at the hospital so that then 2 weeks before, so they could play them for these kids, so they'd know who the hell was coming to visit them. And so we got there, and, you know, we're excited and stuff. And we go and I had no idea what we were gonna do. Everybody brought some swag for the kids and stuff, and there were all those videotapes sitting there, every one of them unopened. And so it's like, oh shit. And then Hemming was really good. He sat right down on the floor with the kids. And so anyway, so we did that for a couple of years, and that was cool and everything, and it was rewarding and it was nice. But the third year, I invited Travis Pastrana, and you know, at that time, Travis was having a lot of conflict with Roger DeCosta about, you know, Travis wanted to do freestyle and he wanted to do fun shit. He didn't want to be, you know, he wanted to be a racer, but he didn't want to be pigeonholed in that sort of a corner. And at the time, he had a cast on his arm. And so I invited him to come visit the kids with us. And he says, hey, so you know what we should do? And he you know, he's a young kid at that point. He says, why don't we do a freestyle show out here? We'll just bring some ramps right here. We'll put on a show for the kids. And I said, I said, Travis, I said, look at your arm. You're in a cast. DeCosta, he already kind of hates you, you know. I don't want him to hate me too, you know. I mean, there was a conflict there about this, and freestyle wasn't blowing up at that time. And I said, but I'll check. And I thought, you know, the hospital's not going to go for that. And so I approached Zare, the big kahuna at the hospital. And as luck would have it, his kid was a fan of freestyle motocross. And that's all it took. And that's, you know, you don't know about anything unless you try it. And to this day, I mean, I've done this for now, we just had our 14th year of doing it. And we've been doing it since 2003 was the first year. And, you know, I still get these freaking EMTs out front, you know, as soon as we set up the ramps and shit, they're like, oh, we don't got to drag them too far. You know? And every year it's the same clowns.
Steve, when does that event happen? Does it happen in the fall?
Well, I try to like work it in early in the year doing Supercross when the guys are all. Well, it used to be they'd all be down here for, well, not down here, but you know, in California area, and so now they're all living in Florida, so it's a little harder to put it together. But shit, this year we had I got. I should say for the first 10 years, I got to thank Red Bull that they underwrote it, which is kind of weird because Loma Linda is a Seventh-day Adventist hospital, and they're pretty strict about, they're like, they don't sell caffeine, it's all vegetarian, and it's a really, really, really great.
They'll fill kids full of drugs, but they don't want any caffeine there.
No. Well, they'll fill them full of, you know, not the drugs that their parents are on. Yeah. But anyway, now you got me digressing here. I don't want to stoop to your level here, Joe.
I wouldn't ask you to, Steve. The raccoon story, come on. He wants raccoons, he gets a motorcycle, becomes a great support rider, goes on to be a test rider for a couple of different magazines, and then gives back to it through the Loma Linda Hospital. Steve Bauer, you got a big heart, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. Congratulations on, what did you win?
Go bag of swag, man.
Bag of swag? I think I got everybody, and even some people that weren't on the list.
Well, we definitely cleared the room.
We definitely cleared it, Steve. Where is Charlie Hopkins? Is Charlie Hopkins still here? Charlie or Bob Stewart? Either one? Neither one are here. I want to thank everybody for being here today at the Road to Recovery charity here for Del Viega Park. And I hope you all come back next year. I'm Joe Abadi. Be sure to watch my show every Wednesday night. Vintage Motocross Q&A on Facebook and YouTube. What do you want, Steve?
Okay, so Bob Myers, he brought me up here, the great Bobby M. He's a NorCal guy. You guys should all know who he is. Yeah. Anyway, so Bob came from Arizona to pick me up, rented a car. And what does he rent? He rents a fucking electric car. Pardon my French. Electric car. It took us like, I can't get into it. We had to stop 14 times on the way up here and sit there for 45 minutes while the stupid Ford Mach-E Let's just spell it M-O-C-K, not M-A-C-H. And they mock me.
Things take time. I'm sure the next time you get a, that's okay. You're old and you don't know what you're saying. It's okay. He's delirious. He didn't sleep. Let Charlie Halcomb come up there and close this thing. I don't work this hard when they pay me for stuff. Charlie Halcomb. Thank you for once again letting me be the MC for your great event, Road to Recovery. A lot of great people here today. Thank you, and of course, Rob Stewart, who do so much to put this event together every year. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Once again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate everybody showing up here. I know it, we're all into our regular routines or whatever. We got to step aside our routines and come out here. But 2021, we put this thing together. A friend of ours, Brock Glover, actually suggested it, and we had COVID going on that time, and we had 150 guys here at that time because it was limited with the city. They only let us have 150 participants. This year we've got over 300. So thanks again. It's going to be a real successful event for Road to Recovery, and we look forward to doing it. They want us to do it another year, every year, but we got guys, Larry Wapsick's coming out from Florida. We got Tom Rapp coming out from Montana, Pat Richter from Alaska. A lot of guys traveling a long ways to get here, so we can't. I don't want to push these guys that much to come down here every year, so we'll do it every 4 years. But once again, you guys help make this event another success, and thanks again, and we'll look doing it again. Hope to see you in 4 years. Got a little tanker too. We actually got